Nearly everyone in America has had this dish either at a diner or a friend's house. The dish I'm talking about is meatloaf, and I know it's commonplace, but I'm a firm believer that everything deserves exploration. So today is National Inventors Day, and our sponsor is blacksocks.com. Now, Black Socks have a really interesting business model and an interesting invention. They created something called the Sockscription. Similar to a subscription, the type of subscription you get to, let's say, a magazine. But instead of getting Sports Illustrated delivered to your door, you're getting something actually much more practical, underwear. Underwear, t-shirts, socks, things like that. Go online at blacksocks.com, opt in, and then once a month you'll get a clean set of underwear or socks, and no longer will your undergarments become ratty and tattered and old. Check them out online at blacksocks.com. So today's topic is meatloaf. Meatloaf. Meatloaf is a dish that primarily is made up of, you guessed it, ground meat. That meat is often beef, but it can be things like veal, pork, human, venison, chicken, and generally it's kind of packed together into a loaf, similar to the way you have a loaf of bread, and it's baked in the oven. Meatloaf is the second cousin twice removed of the meatball. It dates back to Europe, where in the 5th century, the Romans were making a similar dish. The modern version of meatloaf that you know and love comes closest to the classic dish, scrapple, which is made famous by the Pennsylvania Dutch and is certainly something we will cover in the future on WTF. And the recipe for the common meatloaf dates back to the 19th century. The 19th century, well, what was happening then? The Industrial Revolution. You see, during the Industrial Revolution, meat was able to be produced and ground at much higher quantities for much cheaper. This kind of gave way to Americans' love affair with meat. Only problem was, shortly after came the Great Depression. And in the Great Depression, people didn't have a lot of dollars in their pockets, so they couldn't buy a lot of ground meat. But they still had this meat obsession, and they had to come up with a way to stretch their meat, and thus gave way to fillers? What type of fillers? Good fillers, like vegetables, grains, bread, eggs, and spices. And so with all of those ingredients added, we had the birth of the modern meatloaf. The meatloaf is typically eaten with some type of sauce or relish. I know a lot of people create a brown mushroom gravy for their meatloaf, while others baste the meatloaf in a tomato-based sauce. Myself, I use the mother of all condiments, ketchup. So here is how I make my own variation on a classic meatloaf. First, add 1 pound of veal, pork, and beef to a bowl, then add 6 chopped garlic cloves, 1 large diced onion, 1 cup of chopped bell peppers, I'm using a mix of red, yellow, and orange, 2 stalks of chopped celery, 2 diced carrots, 1 cup of breadcrumbs, 1 egg, pepper, salt, a palmful of paprika, and a palmful of chili. Now put on your meat gloves and mash it all together. Form it into a log or whatever shape you'd like. Pop it in a 375-degree oven for about 15 minutes. While it's in the oven, you're going to mix together 1/2 cup of ketchup, 1/4 cup of Worcestershire, a little bit of liquid smoke, a little bit of soy sauce, and about 3 tablespoons of molasses. Mix that all together and baste it on top of the meatloaf. Let the meatloaf cook for another 30 to 45 minutes or until the internal temperature reaches 160 degrees. Slice it thickly, top with more of the condiment, and enjoy. So that's how I make my meatloaf. You can refrigerate it overnight or eat it immediately. It pairs really well with egg noodles, or you can make my celery root puree, which will go with it beautifully. Tune in tomorrow for another WTF, and if you're watching this on iTunes or YouTube, rate it and leave a positive comment. I will see you tomorrow. Meatloaf.
No. You gotta do the full thing.
But I don't like fillers. Fillers? That sounds horrible. What kind of fillers? Fillers? Bad fillers? No. Good fillers. Things like vegetables and bread. That was hard.